What we're going to do now is we are going to find the domain and write it in interval notation of the following expressions. The first is a square root, which is an example I'm using of anything that has an even index. Remember that the index refers to the number that's sitting in the basket of the square root. When we don't write a number there, the number is assumed to be a 2. And so this, what I'm going to do, applies for any even index if you're asked to find the domain. We cannot take the square root of a negative number as far as equations are concerned. So what I'm going to do when I am asked to find the domain is I am going to take the radicand, that's what you call what's under the square root, the radicand, or you can just call it the junk under the square root, and I'm going to take the 2x minus 3 and say it has to be bigger than or equal to 0. That means it can't be negative, so it has to be bigger than or equal to 0. It has to be anywhere to the right on the number line. I'm going to solve this inequality, and that is going to give me my domain. So I add 3 to both sides, and I have 2x is greater than or equal to 3. I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides, and I get x is greater than or equal to 3 over 2. Now, that means that the values that I can use in this radical are any number bigger than or equal to 3 over 2. Now I'm going to write this in interval notation. When we learned interval notation, we learned that when my values are bigger than 3 over 2, that 3 over 2 will be the lower bound of the interval, and infinity will be the upper bound of the interval. I always put a parenthesis at infinity, and since I have an equal sign in this problem, I use a bracket. Now, the second example I have right here is what if there is an odd index? So I'm going to use the cube root of 5x plus 7 as my example. So this is what to do when you have an odd index. Well, you can try this out on your calculator. If you take the cube root of a positive number or the cube root of a negative number, it's going to work. The cube root of negative 125 is negative 5. So it does not matter what value of x you plug in. You can take the cube root whether this turns out to be a positive value or a negative value. And so the domain here is all real numbers. And the way that we write that in fancy math lingo, all real numbers, is negative infinity all the way to positive infinity. It's the whole number line. And I'm going to put a parenthesis on both ends of that, and that is the domain of an odd indexed radical.